Sour Patch Kids to nibble on. I also have these like protein chips my friend brought one
Oh, you
time.
gotta balance it out. Okay.
So
It's a
yeah,
good balance. Protein and Sour Patch Kids.
yeah,
Great mix.
it's a very interesting combination. You get something so sugary and sweet, and then you have like the savoriness of what's the like.
Poddecky. Poddecky. This is Poddecky. Hey guys, it's Adel, and I'm back with another episode of Poddecky. Just a quick reminder that if you haven't done so, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. What happens when you get all the Kennys in the world and mix it with Justin Bieber? You get this next person. My next guest is a photographer and journalist based out of the Jersey Shore area. In our discussion, we talk about photography and our favorite music projects so far this year. My next guest is Kenny Bieber.
How's it going, Kenny? How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm just kind of chilling. I think like a lot of us are right now. I'm just kind of taking things day by day. But, I've been doing pretty well. Actually, July was a surprisingly busy month, given all that's happened since this went down. So I'm blessed to be healthy, blessed to be, still doing my thing to an extent. Like everyone's just kind of taking things day by day and just kind of enjoying the moment. I feel like it puts things in perspective a lot, these type of events. You know what I mean? You kind of value your free time a lot more than you used to.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. The whole quarantine, people like reevaluated a lot of things and adjusting to staying at home and not being like near people and just being basic quarantine and isolated from their typical routines and whatnot. But how was your July so far? The past month for you.
Actually, because I do photography. Before quarantine hit, I was doing a lot of music, event photography. And then obviously that was one of the first industries that is still pretty affected by this. But I was able to do a couple of shoots that I was definitely thankful to be a part of. Obviously not to the same level or extent as it used to be. But, any opportunity now I think is kind of worth branching out into as long as it's safe and sustainable. It was nice to kind of get that motivation to kind of have a small sense of community somewhat, not obviously as it used to be given the guidelines and standards. But yeah, it feels good to slowly, I think, get back to creating art, even though obviously I think that this event puts things in a bit of a challenging situation. Oh, yeah. But artists, I think one of the things about being an artist is you kind of have to adapt to challenges and changes. And this has been both of those tenfold. So
yeah, you're right. Definitely there's a lot of adaptation that everyone has done during this whole time. So during the quarantine, how were you able to maintain your creativity?
Ooh, it's tough. Some days were definitely easier than others. I'll be honest. There's been a lot of days where, you wake up and I'm like, I don't really feel super productive, or, you kind of you think you're going to do a lot of tasks and then you kind of end up only doing one. But I think in the beginning, because I do a lot of music reviewing, blogging, as well as photography, I think writing was the biggest one in the beginning, because obviously live shows were at a standstill, a lot of events were at a standstill. So I kind of dived back into that. And I kind of was keeping up with a lot of current music, I think was a big thing, because obviously there was a lot of albums that actually, believe it or not, I didn't get around to before quarantine, is because, when you're busy, it's like you always hear about things, you always want to check things out, but you kind of get stuck in that, I'll get to it later, I'll get to it when I have time. And then, time kind of just exploded on all of us. So I was like, all right, well, now I have the time to do this. And, I discovered a lot of really good artists, a lot of good local artists put out a lot of good work, a lot of up-and-coming artists put out some stuff that I maybe wouldn't have noticed or listened to had I not had the time to seek it out. And writing about it kind of helped. It kind of gave momentum. All right, let me catch up on all these things I hadn't listened to, or let me interview some of my friends who are putting out new music, or let me kind of catch up on things, or just go out for a photo shoot, maybe practice my technique, photographic area I wouldn't be able to, kind of put things on pause to an extent, but kind of hone the craft and just kind of get back to the pure enjoyment of it. Because I think that when you're in the middle of hustling and creating a brand or a name for yourself, you do almost not that you forget to have fun, but you get concerned with so many things about how do I make money, how do I advance. It's nice to kind of slow down and just be able to, I want to photograph something because I want to, I want to write something because I want to.
Definitely with the quarantine is really a time to focus in on your craft and to revisit and the different techniques you would do into your craft. So just honing in on your skills and just reworking and relearning and, improving certain areas definitely is a time like to definitely do that and work on that. So
Totally, man. I mean, if any time, now's the time. I mean, I feel like a lot of people too, like it's tough because I feel like everyone feels this need to be massively productive now. And I'll be honest, like this past couple months, I haven't ridden as much as I did the first 3 months. And there's some weeks where I'm like, oh, I have a bunch of shoots, and then some weeks where I don't. So it's tough to deal with the fluctuation. I think that's been like the hardest part is being okay with not being as productive as you used to be. You know what I mean? It's like the challenge of kind of adjusting to the fact where, okay, there's a weekend that goes by and I don't have a show, or I don't have a big album to review, or I don't have a ton of things. And I think it's kind of like some artists, like you do have to kind of feel the need to create, but sometimes it's hard to kind of maintain that motivation. So it's been a little bit of a struggle, but I think also it's been nice to kind of just enjoy the things I have been able to do, because it's nice. Like they stand out more because it's like, okay, like it feels more special given the circumstances.
Exactly. I feel the same way too. Like during the whole quarantine, it was hard to maintain that sense of like creativity and getting things going. Like I feel like a lot of people have gone through that, and they go through some speed bumps in the way during that time. Like some strings will feel like very productive, and then some days just kind of just drag on, and then it's just let's do this another day, or basically. So
yeah, it can be brutal. It can definitely be.
Yeah.
Usually the two extremes, one or the other.
So like people do go through these cycles of like productivity and unproductivity, basically. So you did mention that you're into photography and you take a lot of photos for these Asbury Park artists and musicians. So I would just like to start off and ask you, how did you get into photography?
Wow, it's an interesting story, actually. So about, I want to say late 2016, early 2017, I was, I think, going to school for journalism, and it was a pretty stressful semester. I was doing a ton of writing, but it was a lot. It was, a lot of like stuff that like I wasn't used to writing, a lot of outside the comfort zone, and I learned a good amount, but I think I was getting a little burnt out, and I felt like I needed something that was an outlet that I could enjoy, but I didn't feel the need to like be forced to like always kind of adapt to something that wasn't necessarily my own voice. And I didn't know what that was going to be. Mm-hmm. So one day I think it was like late December. I was just looking for something to do. And I found a camera I hadn't touched maybe in years lying around. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to pick this up, take a couple pictures of the beach, and we'll see what happens. I really had no plan or motivation or agenda with it. And, we went to the beach, played around with it, and I really enjoyed the images I got. So I was like, okay, I'll post them up, just kind of see where they're going to go. And people were like, oh, like, are you picking up this as a new hobby? And I didn't think much about it. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll check it out. And months went by, I took a photography class for school, and I really fell in love with it, really enjoyed going out, getting a new perspective, falling in love with kind of like taking your time and creating impressions of the environments, and just kind of enjoy the fact that it gets you out of your comfort zone, gets you to kind of participate in something, and you eventually kind of create art on your own terms. And then the music element came a bit later on. So actually in mid 2017, I had to get an internship for school. And one of the internships that kind of came my way was I had a friend working at House of Independence, in Asbury Park. And I just took it because I needed it. And I didn't, honestly, before then, I'll be honest with you, I didn't really see a lot of live music. I liked music, but I wasn't like a part of any scenes. Or I didn't know a lot of bands or artists. Like I really didn't know Asbury Park had a music scene. But before then, it wasn't a pop in town. And through that internship, I learned a lot about the music scene, the community. And I was kind of like, I'm still doing photography, and I was looking for new ways to expand it. And I was like, well, what if I photographed a show? And I remember I went one night, photographed a couple local bands, and just kind of fell in love with the rush and the excitement. And from there, it just kind of took off. And then eventually I picked it back up mid to late 2018, and it just kind of took off from there and became something that kind of really felt fulfilling and exciting, and just opened up this diverse community of artists and creators that I had no idea even existed before then.
That's cool. So yeah, basically you found a way to fill in like that, like creative, like outlet that you're looking for in journalism. Cause photojournalism kind of is hand in hand with, just regular journalism.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting too, cause in the early stages of doing music photography, I really didn't know a whole lot about it. So I didn't really know it was like something people did professionally. I kind of thought it was like, oh, I can bring a camera to a show and just do this for fun. Like I didn't realize that there was an industry where like people make millions of dollars off of it, or to get famous, or people like kind of hire their own personal photographers. So it was a lot to learn in the beginning. And doing local music kind of helped me a bit because it taught me a lot about networking and kind of building a brand and kind of like putting yourself out there. Because the more I kind of did, I realized like people kind of like when you bring a camera to a show, people kind of wonder who you are at times. Like people would ask me like, "Oh, who are you with?" And in the beginning, I was like, "Oh, it's just me." And they go, "Oh, but like, are you with this band? Are you with that band? Like, who hired you?" I was like, "Yeah, just kind of came to have fun." And then the more people ask me, the more I realized like I could kind of turn this into a brand. I could kind of turn this into something that could be my thing. And it took a lot of time to hone that craft, but it's been nice to kind of see the progression because I've been doing it for maybe a year and a half or so. And to look back at the first photo, look back at the most recent, it's been quite a journey and quite a bit of progression.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like that you just popped on and just decided to just photograph all these bands and artists. Like you were saying, it's like, oh, people would ask you, oh, what artists or do you belong with and stuff, but you're just kind of there just like, oh, I just want to shoot some photos and at the shows and stuff. Yeah.
That's how it started off, man. Definitely.
So what is basically your photography style that you go for?
That's a good question, man. I've been trying to kind of hone in on that. I mean, recently before all this kind of went down, I was trying to figure that out. I definitely, when it comes to music and events, I love capturing, I think, a mix of action and a mix of character. Like, I think when I first started photographing music, one of the biggest challenges I had, and sometimes I still have, is that there's so much going on. How do you center in on what's really important, and what do you center in on what you want people to see? Because there's so many things that happen in the show. It's the crowd, performers, I mean, the guitar solo, like the breakdown, like there's so much that happens, but you want to make sure that you can kind of give somebody something that's like, what did you see at this concert that somebody with a cell phone or someone like a disposable camera maybe wouldn't have been able to capture? Yeah. And the one thing I like to capture in a lot of my photos is like a shot of somebody in between their moment of like giving it their all. Like they're in between a moment of getting, like the in between for like in the middle of a song, that smile on somebody's face, or like that moment where they're like banging on the drums and they're ready to kind of like just give it their all, or like that crowd shot of everyone kind of like in rapt attention, or like a scene of like, you know, somebody screaming, or like when they're giving it. So I think it's the build up to the moment that I think I'm most interested in, like the aftermath, I think, tend to kind of create the most memorable images, in my opinion.
So basically like those candid moments that are leading up to something big, or the moments that happen after something big happens, basically. So like you said, like, you know, like a drummer, like ready to like build up to like a climax of a song, or a singer like belting something big, or the crowd just like waiting in anticipation, that kind of way, for like a build up in a way.
Yeah, that's so fun. And it's interesting because I didn't think about crowd shots a lot when I started off. I didn't usually think a lot about crowd shots. When somebody gave me advice about, oh, like you never shoot the crowd in your shots, you should do that. And I'm kind of glad I started doing that more recently, because now it's, to look at the crowd shots now, it's almost like a bygone era because of what's going on today. But crowd shots can have a lot of character. I think when you see people's faces when they react to live music, you can see a lot of like range and a lot of like emotion, and it kind of tells a story and kind of captures an experience. So I mean, that's lately, before this all went down, crowd shots were some of the stuff I was really starting to enjoy doing.
Yeah, definitely crowd shots are something that's great to capture, because I feel like a lot of photographers don't really necessarily focus on the crowd. They always want to, you know, get the artist. But, you know, if you say you're at like a music festival and there's like thousands of people just right behind that barrier just watching the artist there, and then you just capture those moments of like the crowd, the attendees, like seeing that artist or band. It's like, definitely, you see them all like squished together. They've been standing there for like, who knows, maybe all day trying to see this one artist or something, and just seeing the reactions on their face when they finally perform and all that. It's really something that's really nice to see.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've photographed at a lot of mid to smaller venues, and it's interesting. Like, I remember I shot my first show with Sterling Ballroom like last November, and I got one shot of the crowd that I really thought was memorable. And it was interesting because I feel like you can almost kind of capture or encapsulate how memorable or how powerful a show was based on the crowd. Because obviously the performer is an important part of it, but crowds help tell the story, because audiences, I feel like, are the true test of whether an act or not truly resonates with the world. And I feel like if you have a crowd, with, say you capture a shot of somebody like they kissed during the song because it's the song they got engaged to, or like it's one shot of somebody like screaming, or you can after the crowd like in the middle of that like eruption, it's like that's what live music is about, is like releasing emotions and connecting with them visually. And I think that those shots, not just my own, but other people's images of the crowds really stand out to me.
Oh yeah, that's definitely one way of seeing it as like, attendees at a show. It's like a lot of people release their emotions. They're there to have a good time, see their favorite artists, discover new music and everything. So yeah, like that kind of setting definitely sets off those kind of emotions and feelings. So
Definitely, man. 100%.
Yeah. What details do you believe make the best type of photographs?
That's a good question.
Oh.
I would say, I mean, I feel like being a photographer and kind of seeing other people's photography, whether it's music or any other type details, I think kind of can be kind of subjective. I think certain photographers will emphasize certain details over others, and I think it really depends on how the person frames the detail, because any detail can be important in a photo as long as you kind of deem it. That doesn't mean about photography, right? It's like whatever you photograph is important because you're trying to capture it. So
Yeah.
for my photography, I like to the details I have to capture are people's emotions, their essence, the moments in between, like their emotions, the transfer of emotions. I would say, like, if it's performance-based photography, like I did a lot of beforehand, it's a lot of trying to capture like that atmosphere, or like that intensity, or like the action that's being created. So I tend to go for action-based details or emotion-based details.
Okay.
But I think any detail that makes the image important is a detail you're able to kind of capture, and a detail you're able to kind of add perspective on. I feel like, because it can be something simple, right? Like I have a shot that I photographed Alan Stone back in February, and one of the shots that I thought stood out to me when I photographed it is a scene where he brings one of the openers on stage, and he ends up midway through the song hugging the opener. And I captured that image, and I thought it was unique because you don't really see that a lot, like someone bringing an opener out on stage and kind of hugging it out. And you wouldn't
you don't see that too often, really. You just don't really see that too often. But yeah,
and I got it because I felt like that's a moment where I thought that was a good teacher. Like that's connection, that's brotherhood, that's camaraderie. And you wouldn't really think that, like, oh, it's just him hugging the opener, like, thanks for coming on stage. But for me, it felt important. And I feel like that's for any photographer. Any detail can be an important or a great detail as long as you have perspective to kind of frame it through. So details, I feel like, are subjective. But I would kind of say any detail you want to capture is a detail that can heighten the emotion or the storytelling of your image, I think, are definitely noteworthy.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that, you elaborated on well, that you try to capture those moments, like you're saying, with camaraderie and capturing the mood of certain scenarios and the environment. So, yeah. And last thing I want to ask you is, what is it that you want to say with your photography?
Ooh, that's a tough question. That's a really hard question. I feel like the thing I want people to kind of come away with, or the thing I wanted to say, is I definitely want to showcase progression, because I think progression is important. Because I feel like in so many facets of art, we get so caught up in, well, I don't have this many followers, I don't have a blue check on my Twitter account, or I'm not working for Rolling Stone, so why does what I put out matter? But I just kind of want people, and not just myself, but I want people to be proud of whatever they put out, whether it's a good photo, a great photo. As long as you're progressing from where you started, that's important. As long as you're getting out there and going, I know I'm not the best artist, but I'm better than I was a week ago. I'm better than I was an hour ago. I'm better than I was a month ago. That to me is important. So I want to showcase progression.
Oh, yeah.
And more importantly, I kind of want to document, I think, community. I want to kind of showcase like people being who they are. I think that's one of the subject matters I find the most fascinating, is capturing people who they are in their environment of choice. I think that's why I love music so much, because people are in their element, they're giving back, they're becoming their fullest version of themselves. And that's why photographing it is such a joy, because you don't have to worry about posing somebody or setting the scenario up. Like, they're going to give you the full range of themselves, and it's up to you to kind of just capture it how you like. And I think ultimately I just want to capture images that show humanity, that capture people in their element, and ultimately just create work that I think the people enjoy and that I can be proud of.
Okay, that's a great answer to that. Yeah, so basically capturing people in the moment and basically expressing themselves like in their truest form, basically, right?
Yeah, I mean that's all you can hope for. I mean, it's obvious they're easier said than done in a lot of aspects, and it's challenging, but I think the pursuit can be very fulfilling.
Yeah, and like you said, basically working on to like improving your craft and yourself and photography. Just like you said, like you're better than you were yesterday or a week ago or a month ago. Is all about moving forward and improving and maintaining that. So
experimental. That's all you can do at the end of the day.
Yeah. This year has had a lot of music projects, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
So let's just go off and say, what are some of your favorite projects so far this year? It's about halfway done with the year. So, yeah, what's your favorite project so far?
There's been a lot, actually. I will say, despite the fact that there's been a lack of shows and a lack of events, it's actually been, I think, a very good year for artists putting on projects that I think have been diverse and eclectic. I think one of the albums that stood out to me the most, some of the albums that have stood out to me the most this year is I've really enjoyed Fiona Apple's latest record, Fetch the Bolt Cutters. I had no idea. I'm a big fan of Fiona, but I had no idea she was going to put out music this year. And heard the record, and I really felt that it was very much a perfect 2020 quarantine isolation record because you could tell she made it at home. Yeah. You know, she's letting out a ton of emotion. There's a lot of anger. You know, there's a lot of like sadness. There's a lot of like bitter. There's a lot of heavy emotions, but it doesn't sound bitter. It doesn't sound resentful. It's kind of just like a big emotional release, and it's very musically unique. And I think it's very experimental. And I think that kind of encapsulates how a lot of us are feeling right now. Like we're very uncertain about things. We're very on edge. We're feeling a lot of emotion. So to have an album come out that kind of encapsulates that, but still kind of sounds fresh and unique, I thought that was really took me by surprise and blew me away. And a lot of people can agree it really was such a unique and accomplished sounding record. Actually, one of my favorite surprises of the year was, and I'm sure you would agree too, is The Strokes' new record. I really enjoyed a lot more than I was expecting to. But really, this record felt so purposeful and so full of life and energy and felt mature, but it still felt like the band we knew and loved back in the day. So that to me really felt like a fun release.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like Strokes are hands down like maybe my favorite band or top 2 favorite bands. But yeah, I felt with that album, The New Abnormal, like, yeah, it was their first album in 7 years. And the thing like with that album is it still sounds like them, and it still sounds like an album that sounds like it was made today. With them, like, I feel like they're one of those bands, like, yeah, they still have that kind of sound that is timeless in a way.
Oh, completely agree. Completely agree.
So yeah, I definitely enjoyed that album a lot. It's like, it's up there with like my favorite albums so far this year too. So
yeah, it was a genuine standout, and I'm sure you'll also can agree too. And it's Hayley Williams' latest record, probably my favorite record of the year. I think I always loved and admired Hayley for what she did musically, but I think to have a record come out that
you're a big Paramore fan.
Oh yeah, middle school emo. I'm not even gonna front on that.
It's like I feel like I could say the same thing too. Like definitely, her music was around when I was in middle school and late, like around that time. So she's one of the great ones out there still. So
yeah, and it was such a unique record because I don't know if anybody suspected it to sound the way it did. It was such a very well balanced and diverse sonic experience. And like Fiona's record, such a personal record, such a very revealing, soul bearing kind of like of a look into somebody's kind of like flaws and vulnerability, but it still managed to be kind of uplifting and positive and just flat out catchy. And I thought it was just a brilliantly constructed record from start to finish. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Same as like for Petals for Armor was like very similar to that. The Fetch the Bolt Cutters.
I think one's a little more fleshed out than the other, but both of them I feel like really were very personal records. I think they were very much experiences, and I think that they definitely showcased a lot of range. Absolutely.
See, the thing is, like, Fetch the Bolt Cutters is one of those albums I haven't listened to yet. It's like on my list of albums I still have to listen to, but from what I read about it, there's always like all great reviews about it, and yeah, the experimentation, like I heard she was like using all these different recording techniques and different instruments, like banging on pots and pans and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, a lot of that.
So like that's a very unique and interesting way of going about to recording music. So, I mean, I'll eventually get to it. I feel like with Paramore specifically, they kind of just like progress their sound album by album. Like the whole After Laughter album was like a whole switch up in sound compared to all the other stuff. And that was very 80s sounding, very, synthy and pop and upbeat in a way. I mean, even though the subject matter on that album was very like personal, still had a very uplifting sound in a way. The Petals for Armor one is like, I feel like was a continuation of those like deeper issues and, personal stuff that Hayley Williams went through. And the sound of that too, like, yeah, definitely sonically is completely different. Like you see all these different like synthy, experimental kind of indie sounds like you would expect out of like a Radiohead, King of Limbs era. I would say like a Bon Iver, 22, A Million kind of era. Like, very experimental, and yeah, there's like some very uplifting songs on there too. Like it's like very dancey and raving.
Yeah, you got some bops on there for sure.
It grew a lot on me. Like at first, it was like I had to like listen to it a few times to like fully grasp like the meaning of it and like get behind the songs. But I got around to it, and it was like this is a really good album overall. You know, they released that album in like parts. First 5 songs I wasn't really feeling as much. But then when the last 2/3 of them came out, it was like, oh, like I like this a lot more than like the first third of the album, basically. Like, but yeah, it's a good album too. I agree. So
yeah, it's interesting because I feel like a lot of the albums that have come out this year, I think that's almost good. We have so much free time on our hands now because a lot of these records I think were designed to be experienced. I think as one cohesive body of work. I mean, bolt cutters and pedals. I feel like you couldn't really get the full depth or impact of that experience just listening to songs piecemeal or one at a time. And it's interesting to kind of see how other records are kind of following in that tradition. Like I think I just recently listened to Phoebe Bridges' record, and I feel like that's an album that I think really benefits from you know, top to bottom. It's like obviously it has great singles, but I feel like it benefits from being an album because it creates such a statement. I think it creates such a mood, and I think you kind of need to listen to an album front to back to really kind of get how constructed or how accomplished that is.
Exactly. Like that's the good thing about albums like that. It's like, yeah, there's singles that come out, but when you listen to those singles in context with the album and how it fits in with the other songs and how cohesive the sound is and how it ties in with the lyrics and the themes, like those are like, you know, the best albums really that you could listen to.
100%.
In my opinion. But yeah, that's a good thing you brought up that album too, because yeah, that's like another album I really enjoyed so far this year. I know it was released like not too long ago, but I feel like it is one of those albums that kind of captures the whole quarantine stuff too. Really, like the
totally.
The feelings of like, you know, being alone, and yeah, it captures a lot of that mood too. And then even the end of that album is kind of like an end, like an apocalypse is coming, which I feel like could sum up this year already. It's just like the end is near and the apocalypse is coming.
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I just recently listened to it, and I think what struck me about it the most after like the first playthrough is that she as an artist, I think, I'm not sure if she intended this or not, but she definitely reflects a lot of human experience through the writing. And what's interesting about it is that it really should be kind of like a dark, dour, not uplifting record at all, but it's strangely kind of hopeful in the fact that she's admitting like, yeah, life sucks right now, but that's okay because we're all in it together. And I think that what's interesting about the record too is that it creates moments based off a simple element. It's not an album where like it starts off kind of subtle and kind of like this quietly announces itself as like this experience. And I think some of the best moments are not even the bigger songs, but the kind of more subtle, understated songs where just her and her guitar and just her and the lyrics. And some of the observations of her performances are they're truly breathtaking and how powerful and raw and intimate she's able to go with them.
Exactly. I feel I could agree that it's like there's a lot of like raw lyrics, raw emotions, like a lot of very intimate moments too when it's just like her and guitar basically, and to capture those intimate and raw emotions, like I feel like that album captured that perfectly in a way.
Oh yeah, it's definitely one of the more unique experiences. Fantastically written, and the performances vocally are extremely powerful. So yeah, it surprised me a lot how much I enjoyed it, but definitely I think one of the strongest records of the year. And I'm excited to kind of see what kind of it reveals about itself upon repeated listens, because it definitely has a lot of layers to it.
Oh, definitely. Sure. Yeah, it took me like several like listens to also just like to fully get it also, you know.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it, man. It's the beauty of a great record, man. It allows you to kind of spend time and get to know it.
Exactly. Any other albums that captured your interest and want to plug?
I really am a huge 1975 guy, and I know this record is kind of a polarizing record for a lot of people, but I felt No Tone Unconditional Form was definitely one of the more diverse and eclectic listening experiences I had all year. I'll admit, it's a record that I think is flawed and is sometimes overreaches in ambition, but I almost kind of admire such a broad ambitious, sprawling record in a time like 2020, because the world's so uncertain and there's so many elements that are not centered. To kind of have a record that's like, yeah, we're just going to go for this. We're just going to do whatever we want. We're just kind of forge ahead and just kind of explore all these emotions all at once. It's almost kind of like gratifying, because it's like, okay, like I'm going through a lot right now too. It's kind of cool to have an album that kind of like is kind of encapsulating all of that. And also I just felt like it was super ambitious. A lot of the songs kind of went places I didn't expect them to go. And even when it didn't fully hit the mark, I admired the fact that it was attempting to do so.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah. I feel like they did reach a lot to get like a lot of different styles and genres mixed in. It was like a grower on to me too. Like there are really good highlights, and then there's some areas that are like okay to me. It was very ambitious, let's say that, you know.
Definitely.
It does like, yeah, it's like, it's not my favorite, but it's still like a pretty solid project though, you know. Maybe in like a year from now we'll see, like revisit it in a way and see how it has lasted, or how it's aged really in a way. So
yeah, I'm curious to see that too, because I feel like this is a very particular record at a particular time. So I'm curious to kind of see how people kind of take it. Because I really came away with it really enjoying it, but I know a lot of people have very different opinions about it.
An album I want to talk about like very briefly is the Thundercat album that came out this year.
Okay, I think I heard a couple of songs off of it.
Like, have you ever listened to Thundercat before?
I do. I mean, Thundercat is dope. I like Thundercat a lot. Drunk was a really fun record. I thought one of the best records of 2017. And it's definitely, I didn't get to hear the whole record. I really should have. It's been on my list for a while. But I find him such a fun character in music, because I feel like his music it's very deceptive. You don't realize how much he's doing on the surface until you listen to it back and go, oh, wait, he's really pulling all this out of here. And I mean, it's funny. I feel like you kind of need an artist like that in 2020, because they have so much serious, dark stuff going on. And you kind of get Dragon Ball Do-Rag, and it's like, you don't really know what to make of a song like that at first, but it's something about it. It's just so like, you just can't help be like, all right, this guy's selling it to me, and I'm digging it.
Like, that's hands down one of my favorite songs this year, Dragon Ball Do-Rag. It's just like a perfect mood. It's like, it's funny, like just with the lyrics when you think about it, and then it's just a nice groove on top of that. It's like you listen to the lyrics and you're like, wait, what is he saying? Like, is this some crazy stuff he's saying? But it's like it puts me in a good mood at least. The album as a whole, like if you listen to Drunk, it's very similar to that, because like his songs are like so fast paced and short, and it's like it just goes from one song to the other to the other.
Yeah, very sensation based.
Very like piece like that. So it's basically the same type of, you know, vibe you get. But yeah, that was like one of my favorites too.
I get on that one.
Yeah,
because he's talented, man. I really dig what he's doing, and the songs that I did here, I mean, it's unique, because I feel like one of the things I've noticed, like in the past couple years of music, is that people are gravitating towards retro music, but they're like recontextualizing it a bit. So I think that's a very interesting take on a lot of genres and a lot of sensibilities. Like I like the fact that like he's taking 70s funk music, but he's kind of warping it in kind of like a millennial kind of sensibility. So I think he's a very unique artist, very eclectic.
Yeah, definitely. Like a lot of artists today are like, you know, pulling out influences from like the 70s and 80s and incorporating that into today's like influences and sounds, which is really refreshing to hear. So like another album that definitely fits that kind of sound that I want to talk about is Future Nostalgia by Dua Lipa, which is, you know,
dope record,
very like 70s, 80s pop funk kind of disco.
Yeah, it is
sound to it.
Very
it's
retro.
Like, I don't really listen to too much like pop music or like a traditional commercial pop star, but like Dua Lipa is probably one of those few exceptions. Like I really liked her first album. Like there's something like different about it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like too commercial. Like she has a really good singing voice, and the production behind it was like very clean and, you know, very good in a way, you know. The Future Nostalgia album does pull out, you know, those old styles of genres and perfectly mixes it in with the influences and sounds of today too.
Yeah, I thought it was a dope record, man. I really enjoyed it. I've heard a good amount of that record, and actually it was funny. Earlier in quarantine, because I run a lot, it was on my running playlist, and I gotta say, like, it's cool how, like, talking about the style of it, it really feels like it's dipping into like that 70s, 80s, like 90s, 2000s kind of pop, funk, soul.
Yeah,
but it's fun because I feel like it's a record that just wants to like have fun and be free. And I think that's actually an achievement because so many records these days, they want to be like about a lot of things, and that's great. But like, I feel like a record that can like just put you in a good mood and make you dance and just be catchy, but also still have craft and artistry is hard to find. But you kind of need albums like that. Like it's almost kind of reminds of like early Madonna, kind of in a way. Like it just like you would think, oh, it's just kind of like catchy pop music, but there's really like a sense of style and craft there. And yeah, it's one of like the most fun records of the year. And a lot of the songs, man, are bangers, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. Like I was like surprised how good it was. I was like, whoa, this is
actually. Me too, man. I had no expectation for it whatsoever, and I'm glad I didn't because it's a pleasant surprise for sure.
It's funny that you mentioned about like when you say you go out for runs and this is like the type of music and like that you listen to. I remember before the quarantine, all the time when I went to the gym, Don't Stop Now always played at the gym. So
was it really?
Yeah, it's
great fun. It's great for cardio day, man.
I'm like, yeah, this is like good workout music. I mean, even the song, like the song is called. There's a song called "Physical" on there. It's like literally like let's get physical. Like, you know, it's a perfect workout kind of stuff too. Like,
oh yeah, man,
fancy. And it's it definitely lives up to the title because it's something that's in the future but is very nostalgic too. Another album that does fit like that throwback kind of sound too, I want to talk about is After Hours by The Weeknd.
Yeah, that's a really that record took me by surprise too a bit. That was definitely I think probably his best project in quite a while.
Yeah, I feel like that's like probably up there like as one of his top projects. I know like a lot of people who are fans of The Weeknd always throw back to his earlier work, like the trilogy albums of like House of Balloons and Echoes of Silence and Thursday, like that sound where it's like a little darker and stuff.
Yeah, moody, very atmospheric for sure.
Then he kind of transitioned into more like poppy, upbeat kind of stuff in a way, but still kind of like kept to his craft a bit of like that original sound. The Starboy album is like probably one of my favorites too, because you know that's when he started doing like those '80s kind of sound,
pop stuff. Yeah, right. That song was catchy. That song was dope.
The stuff he did with like Daft Punk on those two songs with like the '80s sounds, and like some kind of like Miami Vice, Scarface kind of thing, like that kind of like mood. I feel like with this album he perfected that sound in a way. I could say like half the album has that kind of mood that fits the quarantine perfectly, that are more like
totally
like a little somber in a way. But then I got myself revisiting this album again recently because like the other half of the album is kind of like very upbeat too, so it's like, oh, it's perfect for the summertime too. So it's it's kind of an all seasons kind of record in a way.
Yeah, man, totally.
Like there's that one song In Your Eyes, which
definitely a highlight,
you know, very upbeat and has like that saxophone like heavily throughout it too. It's like there's like Careless Whisper in a way, you know, like 80s the saxophone. But yeah, I liked a lot. I really like that album. It's like it's up there now as one of my favorite Weeknd albums. I do want to like throw out like an honorable mention in a way to like some artists. I know like Childish Gambino released an album.
Yeah, 315.
Really the most low-key quiet releases I've seen in a long time.
Really. It really was, man. I was surprised by that, to be honest.
Like, he's one of my favorite artists. And he just kind of just dropped an album just out of nowhere in a way, with like no hype, no promotion.
Yeah, no promo even really.
I feel like people just like kind of slept on that album because to me that album that's like one of his best albums in my opinion. Because
totally, man, totally.
The multitude of like genres he threw in there, like hip hop, R&B, soul, gospel. Like there's even some like has like an 80s like synth kind of like influence too. Like a lot of his work on that is like really experimental and really like pushed his sound even higher, like compared to the other stuff he did. Because you know, like the last album he had before was straight up R&B, soul, 70s, 80s sounding too. But yeah, he further progressed the sound with his music, and I feel like it flew under the radar for a lot of people because it literally did not get promoted.
It really did
at all. So
I thought it was really one of the more interesting records of the year because it came out earlier in the year, and I felt like it didn't get the hype of the rollout that like, you know, his past releases normally get. But I really agree with you. I felt it was one of his stronger records, and I thought what was so interesting to me about this record is that he seemed to be kind of like deconstructing a lot of like genres, and I think he kind of like played around with structure in a very unique and fascinating manner. But more importantly, it just kind of seemed like a record that encapsulated so much. There's rock, there's funk, there's all these different genres, but somehow, some way, like each song kind of takes you on a journey and a trip. And I'll admit, like, not every song you always know what the meaning is or what where's the heading or what the layers are, but it's one of those records that feels so like lived in and so immersive. You just kind of want to go with it. And I'm not sure how much music he intends to release further. He always kind of talks about retiring and setting aside his musical endeavors, but this record, to me, if anything, shows he has so much room to grow and progress and become an even more eclectic artist. It deviates a bit from being a hip hop artist, maybe quote unquote, around it. I feel like he's entering a more fascinating stage of his career. And I thought it was, unfortunately, a little bit underrated, but definitely one of his most accomplished, imaginative, and just flat out, I think, surprising records. And I think it was all the better for that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like he became more, like a more well-rounded artist. Like just like heading like the rapper label and like just focusing on the sound and the musicality and like the development as an artist. And then the last album I want to talk about, which probably is my favorite album that's come out this year, is
let's hear it.
Yeah, so this year is Circles by Mac Miller.
Oh, Mac Miller, bro. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta dive a little more into Mac, but he left a legacy behind for sure, man.
Yeah. Like when we were talking about the Gambino album and how Gambino is trying to become like a progressive like musician and craft his sound, like not just become just a rapper really and just like develop and further progress his sound. Mac Miller definitely is the example of that too.
Oh, like, totally.
Literally one of the biggest examples of that. Like you see the progression he made like when he first came out was like, just like a frat rapper.
Frat rapper, yeah, 2011 Blue Slide Park.
Exactly, like the kids mixtape, yeah. But then you see like the progression he made from album to album was really crazy. And it's like he further went away from the whole rapper thing too. And he just like improved his musicianship, just developed it. And yeah, this album was this album is like, very intimate in a way too. And just like very minimal. It just touched upon like a lot of topics like that are very, personal, like depression and isolation and all those kind of things. But it was supposed to be like a companion piece to the last album he released before he passed away. It was like the Swimming album was released, and then a year or so later, this album was released, and it was supposed to be like hand in hand, like a companion piece.
Right, yeah. So, 2 halves of the whole, yeah.
Yeah.
It seemed that way too. I mean, I didn't get to listen to Circles in its entirety, and I heard a little bit of the last record, but I did hear some of Mac Miller's, was it Divine Feminine, and a lot of those songs right before he passed. And, it's interesting. I feel like he was a surprise to me because I didn't really know a whole lot about him for a very long time. I knew who he was. I knew he had the earlier stuff. I really wasn't tuned into it. And a friend of mine kind of showed me that stuff off of Divine Feminine, and I didn't really recognize it as him. I was like, oh, who is this? Who's playing? And he kept saying, oh, it's Mac Miller. And I was like, oh, really? Like him? I didn't, because it was funky, it was jazzy. He was kind of playing around with a lot of elements. And I was like, I never suspected the guy who made It's a Party over here to kind of be making that kind of music. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, I think that he was definitely becoming a more dimensional artist. I think he was definitely opening up a lot and making personal art. I really felt like had he still lived on, I mean, who knows what his legacy would have been like. And he definitely was creating work that kind of stood outside of the genre, but I think still managed to kind of be a progression. And I mean, he was very much an organic talent. And I think it's nice to know that the legacy he left behind is one of progression, one of evolution. For sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like you mentioned, Divine Feminine. Like you would not believe that like the same artist just several years before the release of that would release like an R&B funk album, like Divine.
Oh, definitely didn't call that one.
It's like literally a 180 in a way.
Oh, completely 180.
Yeah. But yeah, the Circles album, it's like very, like I said, very intimate, and like the experimental nature of it is there too. It's like very relaxing a bit. Like some sounds like remind me of like Tame Impala in a way.
Ooh.
Even like some later Beatles in a way too, like
wow.
Abbey Road, White Album era Beatles too. Just
that's the best
the stripped back nature of the album. touches on like those kind of influences too. And yeah, he doesn't really rap a lot on this album, but it's like more like, yeah, he's more personal and singing on it in a way too. So
right, and I think it's interesting how the Gambino and Mac Miller conversation goes, is that both of them started off as very much ostensibly trying to like rap, and then I think once their careers went over, they kind of realized that their greater achievements kind of came from experimentation and kind of embracing soul and funk and more these like vintage influences, but trying to find more of a modern context. And again, like I don't know much about Mac Miller compared to Gambino, but it's interesting how he was initially labeled like, frat boy rap. And it's interesting how he took that and just jettisoned into kind of like a renaissance of like soul and funk and kind of like alternate R&B. And it's interesting his subject matter too. Like the fact that he's kind of going into more like, feminism, like women's rights in a way, like, exploring mental health, but doing so in a manner that doesn't feel preachy or like kind of like over the top. I mean, it's interesting how he became a storyteller in a sense.
Yeah, those are all the albums I want to talk about, really. Do you have any other albums you want to?
I mean, we covered a lot of records, man, and it's funny too that we like match up on a lot of them. It just goes to show how diverse and eclectic 2020 has been as a year musically. I mean, all those releases, I feel like just show how like really like how artists, even though this is a time where obviously we can't perform, we can't quite generate the same kind of revenue, artists are still trying to make statements and expressions of ideas and themes that still feel very relevant and coherent. So now I think we covered a lot of great records. I will say one of the things I've loved about music the most, I think, in 2020 is how we really have time now to discuss and really like experience a record. I feel like back, not that we didn't have that beforehand, but I feel like now especially like we really get to like sit down and enjoy it and really like embrace it. Because I think before then you hear an album once or twice on a commute or in between work or whatever, and it's good, but you don't get the time to really like divulge in it and really be like, oh, like, I really want to get to know this record inside and out. And how do we get to do this now? I mean, I think for me as a music lover, it's been very gratifying for sure.
Yeah, it's been a very unique year so far in terms of music, with just like the whole quarantine and just like sitting and literally is like all you could really focus on. Really, it's just like, oh, you're sitting at home and you're listening to this song,
right?
So it kind of just like zoomed and cued into it. Is there anything else you want to talk about or plug in a way?
I can definitely plug some stuff if you want me to. For those of you who don't know, I do photography under my Instagram handle, K94 Photography. I write for some publications, Stars and Scars, Asbury Park Live. You don't know Jersey, so be sure to check those sites out. And yeah, I mean, hopefully in the future, I get to we can be out there again doing a bit more of that. But I definitely advise people to support those publications while you can, because I think now more than ever we need to support kind of independent artists, independent music magazines, and art photographers and contributors to the scene. Because right now is a tough time, obviously, but the more support we show, the better. Oh, and shout out to Adele's place of work, Telegraph Hill Records. Great company, great label who does a lot of great stuff for local artists. And I think people definitely should tune into what they're doing, because they're doing a lot of really good things, support a lot of artists, and definitely have a very positive attitude, which is good. We need more of that, I think, in the local scene.
Of course, yeah, we're always there to help. And
Joe Palma will like that shout out. Joe Palma will prove that.
He'll definitely will.
He'll like that one for sure. Definitely, man. Totally. But this has been a fun conversation, man. I feel like I could keep going for hours on end about music. It's just so hard to like condense it all down to one whole,
Yeah, exactly. I could talk on and on for hours about this stuff too, but got to end it now. So thanks a lot, Kenny, for joining today. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. I'm glad to do it again, man. Thank you so much, and good night, everyone, and be safe.
Take care.
This is Poddecky.